Museum in 1975, Elman has remained an active participant and is the current chairman of the board. At 83, Elman's enthusiasm in the museum has not faded. In fact, his devotion is as strong as ever. I asked Elman how he got involved in the museum project.
Oh, well, first of all, we came to Newmarket in 1912. And practically everything we had at that time, today they would be classed as antiques. And when we moved to Newmarket, I could never understand as a boy why we had all this old-fashioned stuff and other people had nice new modern items in the house. And well, I think it was in the late 30s, sometime in that period of time, we had a friend over from the States visiting us, and she said, "Why don't you have start up a personal museum? With all this these antiques that you have, there are a lot of personal or private museums in the States, and why don't you start one here?" But I wasn't at all interested in it at that time, and so as the years went by, when my dad died in 1945, I got rid of a lot of the stuff that we had at home. We had a spinning wheel, a yarn winder, big walking wheel like the one over there, and I just cut them up for firewood. We had a butternut butter tub about 30 inches long, a foot wide, and it was a marvelous thing. I just sawed it in two pieces and we chucked it in the furnace. But up until that time, of course, he wouldn't let us touch anything. Well, then this went on until, and then after 20 years later, my mother died in 1968, and then we had an auction sale and got rid of a whole lot more stuff. And so it wasn't until after the, around 1974, when the Historical Society got going, that I began to think that I wish we had all of these old antiques articles we used to have in our home, like coffee grinders and candle molds and butter molds and all kinds of things, you know, that we brought in from the pharmacists that no longer exist. They're very difficult to get. So when I retired in 1975, I gave 19 items of store fixtures to the town to save until such time as the Newmarket may have a museum. So they took these items and stored them in an old building on the old fairgrounds. They all got very dilapidated, but that was 1975. It wasn't until 1980 that I finally persuaded the town fathers to get us a location where we could have a museum. So this place, the lease was expiring, so the mayor Ray 20 offered us this location as a starting place for a museum. So that's roughly how it all began.
You must have got a lot of personal satisfaction in seeing a museum finally happen here in town.
Oh yes, I did. And the big problem, nobody else went to the town officials to try and get them to do anything towards getting a location for us other than myself. I went to the town council different occasions and talked to the mayor and other people, and so eventually we got this place, but I was the only one that did any work. I got letters with signatures of other interested people on, members of the Historical Society, a board or the executive of the Historical Society. They signed a card to send to the council, but nobody would put it in an appearance. They all didn't want, none of them wanted to get involved in it. But once we got the location, of course, everybody hopped on the bandwagon then.
Elman, these artifacts we're seeing now, where do you get most of these things from?
Practically, well, everything has been donated. We haven't bought an item that's in the museum up to date. People in town, they give us things, but there's so many things that we might have had that if we had only started the museum 20 years earlier, we would have got a whole lot more than what we have today.
And if you didn't use your things as firewood.
Yes, right. Oh, well, then the pictures that we have, when I retired in 1975, as I said, I gave those pictures to the town to keep until such time as we would get a museum. But by the time we got them, they were all beaten up, and we had to refinish everything. So we spent a whole year, Albert Evans and myself spent a whole year to refinish them and get them in shape for the opening of the museum.
What is it about the museum that keeps you involved? What is it about the museum that keeps you going?
Well, I'm the chairman of the museum board, and so I'm involved, but that just chairman of the board of directors, the board of management. But
is it personal satisfaction?
oh yes, I get a certain amount of that, very much. And of course, I'm always kicking myself that we didn't get a museum going a lot earlier than we did, and we would have had a lot more items today than that were destroyed or sold or something.
Yeah, I sense that you don't do it for recognition. You do it because you love...
Oh, yeah, sure. There's no thought of any personal recognition out of it. It's just because it's something I like to leave something of our past to posterity, children who are growing up today, so they'll know what their predecessors did and what they worked with and how they did things. And of course, a lot of our attendance comes from school children.
Some people may wonder how you can accomplish what you do with the museum without eyesight. Is it a challenge? How do you do it?
Well, that's a tough one to answer. But I never think of the lack of vision. It's just, it was an accident that happened when I was just after I finished school, and you just have to make the best of it. And either it gets you down or you beat it, and I figured I'd beat it. In other words, I always said to myself, what one fool can do, another can.
A couple of years ago, you received a medal from the Ontario government. How did that make you feel? That must have been very exciting.
That was a bicentennial medal. Well, it was very nice to be recognized. I was very pleased to get it. And I guess you interviewed me at that time, Chris.
Yeah?
But, well, I've had my picture taken in it with around my neck, and occasionally show it to people. And to me, I guess it's like winning a gold medal in the Olympics.
That's right. What other kinds of recognitions have you received?
In 1975, I was a Citizen of the Year for Newmarket. And, oh boy, I'm just trying to think. Well, I know recently, about 2 years ago, the town opened up a new subdivision north of Yonge Street, and they named one of the streets in honor of me, or whatever you want to call it. The name of the street is Elman Crescent. And it's a nice long street with a lot of big brick houses on it, so it's one of the better streets in that area.
So it should be.
So I'm pleased with that.
Yeah. The museum must mean a lot to you because you've not only supported it with countless hours and time involved, but also financially.
Well, yes. Right now, I'm working with the town solicitor to establish a trust fund where money can be left to the trust, and the interest only on it be used for the support of the museum. So I hope that will come to fruition within the next few months.
What do you see as far as the future of the museum, maybe within the next 5 or 10 years? What can we look forward to seeing?
Well, we'll have a much larger location, and we'll be able to display more artifacts at any one time. And I'm hopeful that we'll have more funding. We're also working, or Bess is doing most of this, to get a provincial grant from the ministry, I don't know what it's called, Citizenship and Recreation or something like that, that will help us help with our financing and the operating costs. Well, mainly this particular grant, I believe, is to be used to renovate the Alpha Specialty building. And if we follow their program, why, we'll get a very considerable sum of money.
And finally, Elman, you have seen, I'm sure, a lot of changes in Newmarket since 1912. Maybe you can briefly talk about what Newmarket was like then in comparison to what it's like now.
There's so many differences. I don't know. For one thing, there was no paving on any street in Newmarket. The first streets were paved. Main Street was the first street in 1920. There was all kinds of vacant lots. On every house had a vacant lot beside it where there were tennis courts and or little ball diamonds where kids would play ball. And oh, there's so much more for young people to do. Everything today is all organized, and you can't have these little spots where you can play and I'm thinking in terms of the children. And unless it's organized sports, they have no place to go and nothing to do. And of course, we used to go to school, hitch a ride on the back of a wagon or on the back of a sleigh or a cutter in the wintertime, and never walk a step to go to high school. Always get a ride. Yeah. And sometimes the farmers would kick us off, and sometimes they'd let us ride. Yeah. And oh, there's just so many things. Well, for instance, I can remember when most of the streets, the trees on each side just bowed over to form an arch, and there was an avenue of trees up both sides of the Park Avenue, Prospect Street, and most of the other streets in town. And of course, the big tree on Timsley Street was in its heyday, and that's no more. Yeah. But or the trading tree, I guess some people call it. There were so many more things for young people to do than there is today. The people in Toronto, how did they see Newmarket at the time? Now we're almost a part of Toronto. Was it the little town way up north? We're a little hick town. Yeah. I can remember back in the teens of going to Low Theatre once. And they, of course, they always had a vaudeville there. And so somebody came up on the vaudeville, you know, says, anybody from that hick town called Newmarket, way up north? And somebody stood up and says, I'm from Newmarket. I guess he was a plant. And the chap on the stage said, well, sit down then. I don't want to talk to you. What would the population have been around about 1912? Oh, about 2,500. So I guess everybody knew everybody in town. You'd go to the barber shop, you knew everybody there, and you went to the butcher shop. I knew who lived in every house from our place to the high school. I used to deliver handbills around town when I was, I guess about grades 7 and 8. And you do the whole town, one side of the street. Two boys would do the whole town in the morning. It gives you an idea how small the town was. And you knew who lived in most of the houses. That's fascinating. Is there anything you'd like to add, Elman? Anything we've missed, maybe? I know there's a lot you could say, but... there's all kinds of things, you know. I don't know whether... I know whenever I have a group of youngsters up here, I know that we have a group of little girls coming up. I always sit down and give them a little story about the town and what it used to be like and the early settlers and things like that. So I don't think we better go into all of that. Yeah, we'll be here all day. Well, there's no end to it. That's right. I'm sure you've got a million stories. Oh, yes. Coming up next on Community VIP, Bradford resident and Elvis fan John